Well, hi and welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Today we're here for episode 3 of our Christmas project, Deck the Halls. And this is from the Vintage Christmas book by Lori Holt of Bee and My Bonnet Company. And today we're going to be talking about how we're putting this block together. So join us right after this and we'll whip this out quickly. And welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Well, hi there. Thanks for coming back. Now we're going to put this quilt together, and this is the block. It's a series of the same blocks, so it's very easy, very quick to do. And as you recall, we have the little 4x4 patch that's going in the center. We have this kind of sort of flying geese that's going around the edges. And then we have the center piece that's going in. There are 4 of each of these pieces that need to be constructed. And we're going to do that now. The first thing I'm going to do is sew the center pieces together. And there are 4 of these pieces. And it's just going to be a 1/4 inch seam all the way around. So we're going to go ahead and whip that out. And the way we're going to proceed with this today is, in order to do it in the most efficient manner, we're going to sew as much as we can, and then we're going to press, and then we're going to come back and sew, and we're going to press, and we'll proceed that way until we get it all done. We are using our 1/4 inch foot on our machine, and we do have that set at a stitch length of 2.4. That is kind of my go-to with most of these seams on a quilt when I am using that particular foot. And we're just going to go ahead and put this next one together. I'm not worried too much about matching up the seams in that diagonal seam, but I am looking at making sure we do get a 1/4 inch seam along the edge that we're sewing. Let's see what we've got going on here now. Little clip. If I can get my fingers to work right today. There we go. That's a great seam there. And that one not so much. Oh goodness, that one's kind of off. Let's see, instead of taking time to fix it right now, let's just see if we can put another one together, and I'll do that off camera. Sometimes that happens, and funny enough, it was the second piece I sewed together, not the first. Usually it's that first piece that gets all messed up. Okay, let's try that again. I want to keep things moving for you and correct my errors off camera. Okay, so that one's much better. Now we've got those together, and what I'm going to do is, I think on these others, yes, I opened the seams on these. So let's see if we can manage that without pressing, and then we'll press in a moment. So we're going to press that open with our fingers. And then we're going to press this one open with our fingers. We do want to match up that center seam. Okay, they're together. Let's put a pin or so in there. Should get that matched up. And we're matched up on the ends pretty well. Let's just see what happens. This should come out pretty well for us. If possible, where you stitch over that little diagonal seam, you want to try to get as close as you can to the point where the other seams come together. and that'll give you a really good look. Oops, takes the pins out of it will help. So this is what we come up with. It's not pressed, but we do have that seam open in the back, so that'll be easy to do. So there's our block. We get that all pressed out and it'll look really good. Okay, let's move on. Now we're going to be working on putting the other seams on here. And again, we want to get them pressed out. And we're going to add on this edge piece. Those seams are already pressed out. And here's a tip for you. When you're pinning at a seam, you want to make sure that the point of the pin is at the edge of the fabric, and your ball or your little design or whatever you have up here, the head of the pin is away from that seam. Okay, let's sew that one. Okay, there's one side together. That came out really well. Let's see if we can do the same with this other one. There's usually one that does well and one that doesn't, is my experience. But these are pretty simple construction techniques for this. And I would encourage you with your own sewing to sew what you can and then press. We're just trying to not speed it along so much, but just show it in its most efficient manner, because everybody's busy and we don't want to spend more time watching the video than we do actually sewing it. So to be respectful of your time, we're just trying to get it efficient and show how easy it really is. Okay. And that one turned out nice as well. Okay, so you've got the center piece here. It's not pressed. I'm going to put this one, this strip together, and this strip together. Then we are going to stop to press, and then we'll finish up. Let's talk about pressing a little bit before we sew these, because I want to show you what I've done. For the individual pieces in the center, they were pressed to the dark side. And then when I started assembling it for this center 4 pieces, that's these here, what I did when I sewed the pieces together, I opened up all the seams, because we have a lot of fabric in that area, and if we try to fold it all to one side, it's not going to give us the correct size, and it's going to be rather bulky. So by opening everything, it's going to lay flatter. Now, for these outside pieces, again, when I assembled this, I pressed to the dark side. And then when I started sewing the center on, I opened the center seam, again because we have bulk, and then on these 2 outside pieces, I pressed to the center, pressed to the dark side. And that helps us to keep any extraneous seams from showing here and keeping the bulk down as much as possible. And then on the 4x4s, we sewed all of these and we spun the seams. So that means that in 2 cases, the seams did press to the dark side, but in 2 places they did not. But by spinning that seam in the back, we have a nice, flat, sharp point in the middle. Okay, so let's get started. Let me make sure these are positioned correctly, and then we're just going to sew these together. And to expedite that a little bit, I'm going to put just a pin there so I don't have to hold them both. And we'll do the same for this as well. One of the reasons that I selected this particular project was because the block itself was really easy to put together. There were no special techniques that had to be employed, no special pinning or trimming or curves or anything like that. Everything appeared that it would go together really quickly and easily, and so far that is the case. Okay, there's one. I have 4 little seams on this. Two. Then let's flip it around. Make sure everything's still lined up. Excellent. And we'll take out the pins real quick. And we have those 2 pieces. Easy peasy, right? Okay, so now I'm going to take just a brief break, press these, and I'll be right back, and we'll do the other 2 seams so we put the whole block together. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back from my ironing board, and I did want to cover one thing again, just to make sure we're clear. In this video, I am batch pressing my seams, but in real life, or if I were sewing this outside of the video, I would be pressing as I go to make the seams easier, because when you're dealing with all these seams, sometimes you're going to be in batch pressing, dealing with seams that are going like this all over the place, and it's hard to do. If you do them 1 at a time or 2 at a time, it's much easier. So let's review those seams really quickly. For the middle piece, most everything is pressed to the dark side with the exception of the center seams where we have opened everything up. So that allows this to come in, and then everything is nice and flat and crisp looking. And then on the outside pieces, which are exactly the same, we have pressed everything to the darker except for the center seam, which is open, and then this seam that attaches the center piece to the 4 patches, and we've pressed that to the 4 patches. And then the 4 patches themselves, the seams are spun in the middle. That's this right here. And when you do that, some of your seams are going to be pressed to the dark and some are not. That's just a condition that's caused when you spin those seams. And you trade off that for the ability to have that seam very flat. Okay, so now we're going to put it together. And it's going to look like this. And what we're going to do is when we sew this, you'll see, because of the way we have pressed it, that these seams here are going to nest very well. So we won't have a lot of bulk there, and nor will we here or here. This will be the place where we have the most bulk. So I'm just going to pin those in place, get them back the right way. And we're going to match up that seam in the middle. That's where we're going to start. And then we're going to match up this seam right here. This is where they're going to nest into each other naturally. We'll get that on both sides. And that's really, when you're sewing these pieces together, that's the best feeling, because there's no bulge in your fabric when you're sewing. It's just going to sew over so nicely. And then we're just gonna, this one wants to stretch out of place a little bit, so we're just gonna pin it till we get it sewn. Okay, and then this side, same thing. Matching up that seam in the middle. Matching up the two that nest to each other. And when I pin, I try to pin thinking about how I'm going to sew this through the machine and pin down the pieces that would naturally want to fold in the wrong direction. And I think this one needs a little bit of a pin here. Okay, I think we're good to go. Let's get sewing. Now, if I had another block ready, I would just keep going with the next block, but because we're just working on one, I'm going to take it off and spin it around and do the other side. If you have any places where either the top or the bottom is a little bit bigger than the other piece, you know, you can just ease that just a little bit by either easing it in or stretching it out. I always find that the corner blocks is what gives me the most problem. And I think it's because there just for some reason tends to be more pieces. Stitching done on this block unless we find a problem. And it'll need a little press. But I am impressed that we have most of our seams really well lined up. We've got one that's a little bit off there and one that's a little bit off there. But once the quilting is done on this, you're not going to see that. Now it does need a good press to get all those seams to lie down properly, but that's going to be our block. And pressed, this is what it looks like. It's a nice block, it's colorful, it's got a lot of shape and movement in it, and you can, to me it feels cheery. Now let's look at our instructions real quick, because I think if we look at the assembly instructions for this particular quilt, it has added a small little border around these blocks. And let's see if I can find that real quick. That's part A and part B. So we are going to need some pieces of fabric cut 1.5 inches to go around these blocks. And what I'm going to do is cut those, and I'll be back in just a moment and we will get this border put on this block and finish it up for today. Okay. Well, that was easy. Now let me tell you, we're cutting strips that are 1.5 inches wide and then 12.5 and 14.5 inches long. And we're going to attach the shorter strips to the opposite sides of this block, and then we're going to come back in and sew the longer ones here on the other side, just to create a little border. I think I was on a pin and I think I scraped my table. Oh, ooh. And you know, I think this is a great idea for these blocks because, as I've said a couple of times, I really dislike sewing blocks together that have all of those seams on the edges. I think it makes it so much more difficult to do because you're having to manage all of those seams in addition to the one you're sewing. So let's just get this sewn on. Trying to get this lined up properly. Got one little piece of fabric that's kind of longer than the rest. And that's one of the problems that this little border is going to fix for us. And I'm going to back it up just a little bit because I have a seam that's going in the wrong direction. And I can fix that right by doing that. I'm afraid I'm going to be playing bobbin chicken here because it's getting pretty close. All right, we're going to just do the same thing on the other side. My machine is sewing a little roughly, and usually that means the bobbin is just about out. I may have enough for just one more, so we'll see how we do with that. Now, what are we going to do about these seams? Ideally, I'd like to fold them back, but I think that there's just too much bulk. So we're just going to press them down and sew that other seam on there. And for these, I am going to put a little pin here. Because we will be managing that over some unpressed seams. And it's a little longer too, so that'll help us a bit. At least keep it in place. As we get close to it, we'll probably take that out. But now we've got these two on this end done, and we're gonna do these two. And I've got an extra bobbin just in case. I think I'm gonna be able to do one seam and then probably have to switch it out. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but the one that I'm sewing on now is one that had been pressed. It is not the one we were working on just a moment ago because the pressed one is going to sew so much better. And there's no sense in fighting that if we don't have to. We actually might be able to get that other seam in there. we're going to give it a try. Worst case, we have to swap bobbins. But we're so close now. Now, one thing you do want to be careful with your little green arrow ends is you don't want to cut those points off. And with the fabrics we've chosen, I can see through that little white border fabric, and I can see right where I'm sewing on the green. But you do want to be mindful of that. Okay, we've got them all done. I'm so excited. We've got this block finished. It's come together pretty quickly, I think you will agree. Let me swing this out of the way, and we will take a look at our finished block with the border. There it is. Let me give it a press. I'll come back and show you the final project, and we'll talk about what's on the next episode for this project. Okay, we're all pressed. This block is finished, and I just love it. I love the border on the outside. It really kind of, for some reason, just enhances it so much. And I think it's because it's encapsulating those little 4x4 patches on the outside into this block and making the block just a little bit bigger. This has been fun. We really quickly ran through the process of getting from individual components of the block, sewing it together to get the whole block. Now, the quilt that I'm making is going to be 12 of these blocks put together with sashing. And on our next episode, which will be episode 4, we're going to be working on the sashing. So when you join me next time, I'll have all 12 of these done, and we'll be working on that. And if you remember, let me grab it here real quick. We are substituting the gingham fabric, or the plaid, I think it's gingham, that was in the book for this stripe. So in order for this to work and look like it should, we're going to have to put this sashing on so that all of the stripes are pointed in the right direction and we don't have stripes going this way, dancing on the quilt. Although I think that could be fun, that's not the look we're going for. So join us next time and we'll do the sashing for this quilt. This is a fast and easy project that we're working on for the holidays. I'm so glad you were here today while we worked on this. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. Be sure to share it with your friends and consider subscribing to the channel so you're up to date on everything we're working on. If you click that notification bell, you'll get notified when we start out with a new project or we have a new video. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time at the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Have a great day.